All right, well, our next guest is Matthew Taylor, director of The Creepy Line, a documentary on tech giants like Facebook and Google crossing the creepy line when it comes to influencing users on how they should think and act.
What's up, Matthew? How are you?
Good. How you doing? Pleasure to be here.
Those are some cool specs. I'm just looking at your glasses.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, he likes cool glasses. He's Mr. Cool Glasses. So tell us, privacy on these social platforms, obviously most people are watching on Twitter and Facebook. How much privacy do we have?
We have no privacy. I mean, we have no privacy pretty much in anything. I mean, Google and Facebook build surveillance platforms. That's what they are. Google Maps, Android, they're all for collecting data. So that would be a zero.
And what do they do with that data?
Well, that's the question. I mean, in most instances, they sell the data to advertisers so that they can sell products back to us, which, you know, that is can be debatable whether it's good or bad, but advertising is advertising. But where it becomes more concerning is when they sell it to governments and even law enforcement in some instances. In addition, they can use that data to undermine democracy, which is a big part of what the Creepy Line is really about.
And your documentary was inspired by Google executives Eric Schmidt, who said in 2010 that Google's job was to get right up to the creepy line and not cross it. That is absurd. But I do feel like as we're browsing the internet, it's like, how does a pop-up of, you know, for a dress that I was just browsing, how does that appear on my Facebook feed? But it's like getting right up to that line and not crossing it.
Well, that's the question, is what is the creepy line? And, you know, by our kind of research is that the creepy line gets crossed all the time. What a weird word to use, creepy. You know, we say in the film, a creepy mugger is worse than a mugger. You know, creepy is inherently bad. So we think that there's definitely, you know, from cases that have come out of the EU and things like that, there's definitely some bad behavior that these companies are you know, involved in, and they're crossing the creepy line and they're moving the creepy line constantly.
So let's talk about convenience. I've watched the film. I was at your premiere, but I'm a voracious user of Google. In fact, I'm a Google guide, and I really appreciate all the services. I really do like the Android platform.
Of course.
I guess I want to know how I balance convenience with privacy issues and, of course, concerns about corporate power.
Well, this is one of the big issues, and a lot of the solutions that people have right now, whether it's government, regulatory, these are 20th century solutions for 20th century companies, and we are, you know, these are 21st century companies we're dealing with. So, yeah, how do you balance that? Because people, oh, well, just use another search engine. There is no other search engine. I mean, you can say DuckDuckGo or something like that, but this is 90% of the search. And the reason it works so well is because they collected your data. So it's not just hey, let's slap an antitrust suit on them. We have to actually rethink how to actually create a service that searches the internet without collecting your data. And so we are at the very beginning, and I'm very, very cautious with just breaking something in half, because they are in government, they're in communications, they're in education, they're in your car. It's not just your cell phone. Your GPS may be run by Android. Can you imagine breaking Google in half and then all of a sudden it would be devastating.
Yeah.
Be devastating. So we have to be very, very cautious about what we do as we untangle this. And let's be honest, we opted into this agreement. This was we took the free stuff. We took the free email. And the services work. There's a lot of things I love about Google. I love the rise of their technology. I love the innovation. I love the social networking. But now we are to a point where, you know, they have made some maneuvers that are deeply concerning, again, for democracy and free speech. And that's where they've crossed the creepy line.
So how safe is our information when we're online applying for something and we have to enter our social security number and you see the padlock in the URL bar? Is that safe? I mean, it seems like the information is protected, but it's really not.
If you knew how unsafe you are using public Wi-Fi and putting your password and credit card numbers into things, you'd be terrified.
Guilty.
I mean, you could put little boxes, these in-between boxes in a coffee shop and watch all the packet traffic going back and forth between people's laptops and cell phones, and you could just grab and suck it all up. I mean, that's how Google Street View worked. They would drive down the street and they would take your passwords, they would take your Wi-Fi networks, they would take all your information without you knowing it. I mean, that's Google Street View, which is a very cool service,
It's amazing.
It's
I think
amazing.
that- I mean, you know, what's
You
funny
can see
is
people's houses.
I had. What's funny is, you know, one of the things that I really love about Google. I'm a geography nut, and and my family's been outside of Cuba for 54 years.
Wow.
And one of the things I finally went back, I knew what our street looked like because of Google Maps. They don't have
Google
Google
Maps.
Maps in Cuba, but you know, I knew what the neighborhood looked
Yeah.
like, and I knew what I was looking at. And from a kid who collected atlases voraciously, Google Maps is like a godsend.
It is. It's really helpful.
It's awesome.
But at the same time, pros and cons.
Well, I mean, that's the problem is that there was a point where they were collecting the data. It's what you do with it afterwards. So, you know, if in fact they are swinging votes towards candidates and selecting candidates and lobbying for certain things, or they're implementing censorship on a broad scale towards one group or another, this is where it becomes problematic. This is where looking into your house for somebody who is a bad actor, who's technologically capable, can become very dangerous. And
So how do we find that balance, Matthew? Because we do want, you know, of course, the wonderful technological revolution. We don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to reading a map or using,
I forgot that we actually
MapQuest.
printed out maps back
Remember
in the
how
day.
terrible MapQuest was?
Yeah.
So how do we balance these concerns? And, you know, governments tend to overreact.
Very
Exactly
much.
like you were saying. Like, oh, we have a problem. Break them up.
yeah.
So we don't want to do that, right? And we want to retain all the technological advancements. How do we find a nice middle ground then?
Well, the first thing is that we are the gasoline for their engine. It is our data that fuels them. It's our use of these services. So the very first thing is that some services we shouldn't use. I mean, we really shouldn't use Gmail, which I know breaks everybody's heart.
That's
Yeah, I
like
have
the
3
best
Gmail
service.
email.
Yeah, it's a
I
heartbreaker.
have 5.
You know, we say you shouldn't use Android, that you shouldn't use these platforms. But the other thing is skepticism. I mean, we've gotten so used to like just saying, "Hey, it's free. This is great," but nothing's really free. Free is not free. There is a cost associated with it. So skepticism is the very first kind of. We
So
also
were you just trying to put it out there as a conversation. to
Sure,
get it
yeah.
started?
The film does not really give solutions because there are no solutions yet because we haven't even started the conversation.
You're
And-
simply raising awareness.
Absolutely,
Just be careful
absolutely.
what you're inputting.
Absolutely.
In Google, Facebook, what you're searching for.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it can be dangerous. And these companies can be dangerous if there's no transparency. That's the next stage. We need to know what they're
But
up
public
to.
opinion is something that could greatly initiate change because in the end we are the fuel, as you've said.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a case right now going up to the Supreme Court about, you know, free speech that could change the context of how these companies function. If I, as a user, and my speech is censored, I could potentially sue Google. And it, you know, so this is a real case that's happening right now. And we're in for some very interesting changes. We're in uncharted territory with these companies.
What do you think going forward that the next chapter is? Because, you know, we've seen these hearings on Capitol Hill and, you know, our senators, bless their hearts, as they say in Texas, are
I say bless their heart all the
are
time.
like 1,000 years old. They're like, how do you make money, Mr. Zuckerberg? And it was like ads. You know, our lawmakers are completely unaware of how these platforms work. What would be the advice you have for our lawmakers and other people who are, you know, promulgating public policy in this area?
Well, I mean, I would have to say that it's like this. The government, by design, by our founding fathers, was designed to be inefficient. So you can't do crazy things. These companies are entirely efficient. So I would say that, you know, if they are going to do something regulatory, it has to start with transparency. We need to know if, you know, I don't know if they should be a public utility, but we do need to know if they are making decisions that are shifting votes for candidates. And Dr. Robert Epstein in the film says they could shift up to 12 million votes this election. That's deeply concerning, and the Congress should intervene somehow at that point.
Well, we'll be keeping our eyes on it. Matthew Taylor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.